Greetings and welcome to the recombobulation area. My name is Dan Schaefer. Thank you for joining us. It has been a bit of a discombobulating day here at recombobulation area headquarters on the west side of Milwaukee, but I am very excited for the podcast that we are about to have here. Uh, Before we get into it, as I've been doing with every podcast I record lately, I have to say the exact date and time that I'm recording this in case there is news, in case there's other points of greater discombobulation happening around us here in the state of Wisconsin. So it is Thursday, August 6th. It is just after 6 p.m. And I'm here with one of my very favorite people to talk about politics with. It is the great Angela Lang. Angela, welcome to the recombobulation area.
Hey, Dan. How are you?
I'm having a day, as you well know.
Yep.
A little bit of discombobulation as we get this stream set up. My internet was down today on today of all days, so that was really not a lot of fun. But you and I have not podcasted together in quite some time.
Which is wild to think about.
I know. The last time that it was just you and I on a podcast together, it was May 28th.
Mhm.
The race for governor still had 7 Democratic candidates in it. The recombobulation area was still part of civic media. Giannis Antetokounmpo was still on the Milwaukee Bucks. And here we are.
An eternity later.
And several lifetimes later. And we are just a few days away from the August 11th primary. I just published a piece at the recombobulation area on all of the other races happening in the primary beyond the governor's race. There's a lot happening down ballot, statewide primaries, congressional primaries, assembly races, Senate races. You know, I always look down ballot. So do check that one out. In addition to all of our coverage of the governor's race. But you and I haven't had a chance to talk about the governor's race on a podcast in a little while. I know you've got some thoughts. I've got some thoughts too. Why don't you kick us off, though? I know you've got a few things to say.
Part of me is like, where to begin?
I know.
I don't know. I think the first thing that's at the top of my mind is one, we know elections matter. Midterms all across the country matter, especially in a state like Wisconsin, right? It has national implications. But part of me is like, are we losing the plot here? Why are we digging up 6-year-old tweets about Thanksgiving? I hear people, I hear it, and this is one example of losing the plot, right? But it's like every single time Francesca Hong has to answer a question about Thanksgiving takes away from her talking about anything else and drawing the contrast between her and Tom Tiffany. Because we have such a short runway between the primary and the general, we don't have time to BS around. And we're spending valuable time in the days leading up to the election talking about Thanksgiving tweets.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple things there. One is just the
Yeah.
inevitability of how these campaigns work. And if there are
Mhm.
old tweets to recirculate, they're going to recirculate. And
Yeah.
yeah. And I think, you know, a lot of those tweets were like bouncing around over the weekend, and all of the old
Yeah.
tweets are coming up back again and just like making headlines, and people are commenting on it and all of this stuff. And then I think for me, the tipping point was just like the CNN interview. That it's just like, okay, there's inevitably going to be these questions about these things that people have been seeing over the last few
Mhm.
days. So,
Mhm.
you know, here's your opportunity to answer this question. And I think there have been a lot of politicians who've done a terrific job of answering the bogus, losing the
Yeah.
plot questions and steering it
Mhm.
back towards policy. I didn't think that was a particularly good example of attempts to do that from Francesca Hong. And so the way that
Fair.
she answered that made it inevitable that she's going to have to continue answering those questions.
Sure.
And I think it is not really about necessarily the Thanksgiving tweet,
Thanksgiving.
the
Yeah.
response to it, whether somebody's going to cancel Thanksgiving. Like, that's not a thing. There are much bigger issues. People, as you know, Kate Duffy was saying on our podcast that we did the other day, people can't afford shit. Like,
Right.
there's
Right.
much bigger issues that we can deal with. But I think it is just an example of, a preview of what a general election might look like if she
Yeah.
were to be the nominee and how to deal with that. And I think there's one thing that if you are looking at this as a positive side, if you are a Francesca Hong supporter, which I know there are many of here at the recombobulation area,
I've seen the
uh,
polls.
if you are looking at this uh, glass half full, and it's just like, you know what, this is a test. A part of a primary is to be a test, and it's
Mhm,
better for
mhm,
something like this to happen now, to be
mhm.
prepared for the general election, than for it to happen another time.
Yeah.
Again, it's not what you really want to be talking about the week before the primary, of course, but I think it's better to be going through this exercise now because
Yes.
I think that for so long in this primary, nobody was really getting negative against the
We
other
talked about
candidates.
this.
We've
Like, it's
talked, I think,
quiet.
probably in our May podcast that we did,
We're
right?
like, "It's so quiet."
Nothing was really happening. The
Here we are.
candidates were having these very cordial forums and talking about the policies and
Mhm.
talking about these different things. And I think as we get down to it, it's inevitably going to be the silly season. And I think there is
Mhm.
this, the iron sharpens iron quality of a primary to get the candidate ready for what is inevitably going to happen. And we saw, and you have commented on this as much as thoughtfully as anyone about Mandela Barnes' campaign in 2022
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
attacks that he faced then. And I think
Mhm.
perhaps the fact that he did not face a whole lot of negativity coming up to that
Yeah.
race and the people did drop out of it, he seemed a little bit flat footed coming out of that primary with some of the
True.
inevitable attacks from the Republican gigantic funding monster that is going to inevitably bring the craziest things you will ever see on
Yeah.
every platform everywhere. So I think that
Yeah.
is part of it too. You got to be prepared for it. So that is, I think, the glass half full take that I'm offering here.
Mhm.
One other thing that I think with it is it's just like I don't totally understand, and I asked the campaign about this in a story that I
Mhm.
wrote. I don't really understand going on national interviews like this right now.
I think it's a choice. I mean, I think she should take advantage of every opportunity she can, but I also think there's, like, a moment right now where I would've pulled back, personally. I'd be like, "Alright, I'm getting too many dumb Thanksgiving questions. I'm not gonna do this for a second. I'm gonna focus, and we'll regroup after the primary." So, for a minute, I was like, "Yeah, she should be doing all that she can." I think, obviously, this race was gonna get nationalized very quickly. And we're at that point now where it is, but I would have pulled back in the last week or so because I don't think it's actually serving her.
Well, and the nationalized thing, I think it's different from a governor's race versus like a Senate race or a congressional race
Yes.
or whatever
Yeah, yeah.
too. Because like, in Michigan, like that race absolutely get nationalized
Mhm,
in the
mhm.
primary there with Al Sayed winning. But that makes sense because it's a
Yeah,
national race. You're going to the Senate.
yeah.
In a state race, it makes a little bit less sense to me. Um, and,
I mean,
and
it's
I thought the campaign
nationalized.
and I thought the campaign had a thoughtful response when I asked the question. You can see my story
Yeah,
at the recombobulation area. And I'm just this is why this is again part of the dialogue, part of the process,
yeah.
part of figuring out what is best, going forward.
Yes, because I think it's interesting that this is getting nationalized because I think it's like no shade to, like, Fran. It's not really about her per se of why it's getting
Right?
nationalized. People wanna see, will this DSA type of trend continue, right? Like, even on MS Now, it was like, "Alright, they're reporting on what happened in Michigan earlier in the week." And they're like, "Cool, next up, Wisconsin," right? And
Yeah.
so it's almost less about, like, the people and more about the broader concept of can DSA, or socialism, the big
Yeah.
scary word of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why people care, but I don't think people normally would. I think there's just this big question mark about socialism in Wisconsin right now,
hmm
which again, there's an opportunity, but if it's not working out, pull back. You got to know when it's not working out.
Yeah, 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 and I get everybody's always gonna look at Wisconsin's the bellwether state.
Hmm.
It's the swingiest swing state. I mean, you get calls from national reporters and folks like that all the time asking about
Hmm.
what's going on in Wisconsin. And so we know it's going to be that. So
Yeah.
part of that's inevitable, but part of it is just like you know, uh, that we don't have to say yes to everything. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, so that's part of it too. But what? It's okay. You said we lost the plot. What's the plot that we should be talking about then?
I wanna talk about the issues. I
Yeah,
wanna talk about, I had to Google the other day and I'm like, Trump endorsed Tom Tiffany, right? And then we
sure
pulled up
did.
the quote and we were like, "Oh, he did this in January," right? Like that I'm pulling that because I'm like, that is something my team will likely want to talk about on doors. It's not in the weeds policy. It's getting back to what people care about. And sometimes people care about where the president is endorsing,
Yeah,
and that can also be enough. And so I think we're not having conversations about like the state of Wisconsin, really. And I've watched the debates, I've seen the forums,
there've been a
but
lot of
it
forums.
doesn't. I'll admit I haven't seen everyone. There's probably been like 50 plus at this point,
Probably.
but I've seen enough. And I feel like we're getting to the surface. I do, I recognize the one and only televised debate. There were some real hard questions.
Yeah,
Hey, you're polling at 1%. Is it a wasted vote? Like there were some questions that were like, wow. But
yeah,
also while valid, I want to hear more about um how Madison is going to continue to respond to police violence, how local municipalities are, going to keep communities safe with ICE. Like we're not getting to the heart of those questions because
right,
there's just like so
right.
much drama. So I do feel like we're losing the plot in this way. And like not to just, to balance it out, the fact that I got a call and like people were hitting me up last night of like, are you saying that electability is a racist slur? And I'm like, I've not said that. And they're like, well, Crowley said it was a slur and it kind of morphed into something else. And I'm like, yes, there's dog whistles and like establishment and all of these things and electability. But like, while those are important conversations, and I realize the irony of me saying this as someone that has been very loud about the electability conversation for quite some time, now it's like it's not becoming meaningful because now we're debating if the word electability and establishment are slurs. And it's like that's also not the point. Like a slur is not something is like a category of word I use lightly. Like there's a level of hate and usually something else behind it. And so
Yeah,
to be seen as like establishment is now a slur, it can have some dog whistles. We can unpack who is saying it and maybe the message behind it. Absolutely. But the fact that people are like, "Were you saying it's a racial slur?" No, that's also not what I'm
yeah. I just to give folks who might not have seen this clip a little bit of context.
saying.
So yesterday, believe it, there was an event in Madison where David Crowley was responding to a reporter, Vanessa Kjeldsen, who and he said there, and I quote, "When people try to call me the establishment, I look at that as a slur, particularly as an African American candidate," said at this campaign stop in Madison. This clip has been widely circulated among those of us who are way too online and way too
Yep,
focused on this stuff, but maybe hasn't traveled outside. Uh, but I think
that's true.
I think it is just same deal with the CNN interview. I think it is just like we are in the pressure cooker right now. We are
Yeah,
in the final days, so the scrutiny on anything that anyone says is going to be heightened. And
yeah.
I just did you have a problem with what David Crowley said there? Did you have a problem with the question? I mean,
I the answer didn't land with me. I felt like I
yeah,
know what he was trying to say, right? And he's ever since he jumped back in, he had to battle this establishment question.
yeah.
I think what did it was people were like, "Slur? Whoa, that's a little maybe that's a little much," right? Um, have I also on the flip side, and I've had conversations with friends, and Black politicals that are also frustrated, like, yeah, absolutely. There have been people that have used the word establishment and electability as almost ceiling for Black folks, right? Like there is
Mm,
an inherent kind of ceiling implied, and this isn't my preferred candidates. I like this candidate, so I'm gonna apply this like ceiling type of thing. And we can unpack if there's some racism or some bias in there. So it's not to say that it's not without significance and meaning. It's just calling it a slur, I felt like I needed to stretch before that reach type of situation.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
was how it landed for me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that makes a lot of sense. And, um, I think the word establishment is just I don't even know what it means anymore. Like
I
I've joked
don't
about this. I've said this in a couple places too, where um, I think it's almost like Democrats and those folks on the left are using the word establishment the way that conservatives use woke. Like, everything I don't like is
Mhm.
woke. Everything I don't like is the establishment. And I think,
Yes.
we're in such a different moment from the last time that we had a primary in Wisconsin like this, like the 2018 primary that Tony Evers won. Um, I think that immediate reaction to Trump's first term was, I think people wanted a more establishment type of figure,
Sure.
right? They wanted a
Yeah.
more, the protecting the democratic norms and like getting us
Mhm.
back to this is not normal, all of that kind of like
Mhm.
talk that was happening at the time. I think that's what people wanted. And I think now it's very much not what people want, is to go
Yeah.
back to some sort of democratic establishment. You look at the way that, some of the Democratic leadership's response to Trump 2.0
Yeah.
has been very lacking in a lot of ways. And so I think that is a way for people to channel this frustration
Mhm.
that people have with the quote unquote establishment, right? An
Yeah.
establishment that, like, frankly, over the past decade, you lost to Donald Trump twice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
people are going to be frustrated with that establishment.
Mhm.
And maybe this is just kind of, so many things are just like these proxy fights for what's
Yeah.
happening nationally. And it's just like the Bernie versus Hillary of it all that just like continues versions of it over and over again. Um, but I've said this about Francesca Hong, where I don't think her campaign necessarily fits in like your typical progressive movement campaign. I don't think it is your
Mm.
typical cut and paste progressive movement
Mm-mm.
campaign. I think it is very distinct. I think it is
Mhm.
very much its own thing. It has focused on the issues. It has focused on the ground game. It has elevated things like data centers. It has done things differently. And I think that is why she has found some success with it and why
Yep.
she is leading in the polls. And at the same time, I don't think David Crowley can necessarily be considered the same type of establishment candidate either.
Right.
I think in Wisconsin, so much of it is the establishment part of this is like, is it just Evers? Is that what the establishment is here? Because if it was the establishment, it would look like kind of what we saw in the Democratic presidential primary in 2020, when all of the candidates got behind Biden.
Right.
This isn't all of the candidates dropping out and
Oh.
backing one. We still have Kelder Royce in the race. We still have Joel Brennan in the race. Mandela
Oh,
Barnes
yeah.
was in the race until, a week ago. Like, so this is not, and it's not like he's backing
Mhm.
Crowley either. So it's not like there is some sort of coalescing around one person. To me, it doesn't
Yeah.
quite fit the typical establishment narrative, because I think this instance just feels like, to me, Tony Evers going rogue, given the
Yeah.
opportunity after what happened with Sarah Rodriguez. I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I mean, I don't it's funny that I have no idea what establishment means anymore, given that I'm an organizer and I'm supposed to be fighting said establishment.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
even know what establishment means anymore. Um, I've been called a radical and I've also been called establishment lately, which has been crazy to me, which
Yeah.
really made me it really solidified no one knows how to use this word. Um, Everyone has their own definition. Everyone's tossing it in a way that is convenient for them to amplify whatever candidate they're supporting. That's not to say that like I can see why some people are calling Crawley the establishment, largely because of the Evers situation, or like the Evers endorsement and everything that comes with that. I think it's not just Evers, it's his network and what he can bring.
Sure.
And
Sure.
then I also think that there's like a class type of dynamic, right? And I welcome these conversations. I've seen some really great takes of some that like I didn't know I agreed with until I saw them on social media, which was crazy. Can't always say that, but um, I people saying, like, yeah, you can be Black and also be a part of the establishment, right? You can be a kid from 53206 and end up being a part of the establishment. And there was, really interesting nuance of how they talked about it. And I think all of that is fine. I think what I'm realizing is that maybe it's just the structure of social media, but we're just lacking nuance in conversations of
Yeah.
these things. We're throwing around
Yeah.
words like establishments and all of this type of stuff, electability, people polling not great, talking about what's electable. Yeah, like it's just everyone is like saying their own things behind what feels like buzzwords,
Yeah.
um, which is really annoying, and I don't think it's actually particularly productive for a broader conversation about the issues that Wisconsinites are dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, and I feel like I deal with this in media too, because it's just like if somebody will, accuse me of being part of the establishment or whatever. It's just like, really, my
It's also
independent
funny.
media that I'm not part of, like the traditional media, that's the establishment now too.
Mhm.
And so, you know, I think, I mean, for me, it's this ideological conversation too that the
Yeah.
establishment is also just kind of like the word that you fit in for like a center left,
Mhm. Mhm.
of the field, like the center left option versus the further left option that
Mhm.
feels like a little bit more of it like the insurgent, Democratic Socialist or however you want to characterize it, that's going to upset the conventional center left, you know, cohort, faction, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but I think some of it is just partially with as it pertains to Crowley and his campaign and restarting it with that endorsement from Tony Evers. And I think I want to talk a little bit about the Evers factor in this election
Let's
too.
please. Mhm.
Because I think, he didn't endorse early. There are people, both of his lieutenant governors were running in the race. He has had members of his cabinet in Missy Hughes and Joel Brennan who are in the race. And he decides to, after all of the crazy implosion with Sarah Rodriguez's campaign, which I think that is the real turning point with all of this,
Mhm.
was that, the press release we got on that Sunday night saying that she was firing her campaign manager or finding all of these campaign finance issues that they had uncovered. Um, that seems like the real turning point because I thought Rodriguez had some level of momentum at the time.
Me too.
I had heard that a number of like purple district legislators were going to be uh, endorsing her the following day, like
Mm.
that Monday,
Mm.
that they were going to be endorsing her, but they pulled back on that after the campaign finance stuff came and fell apart. She had that press conference, didn't go all that great, I didn't think. And then, days later, she was out of the race.
Yeah.
And so uh, I think, you know, because of that opening the door for Crowley to come back in, and then Evers deciding,
Mhm.
like, you know what, I'm gonna make the endorsement. And I think there's some complicating factors with that too because of Evers' relationship with the legislature.
Sure. Right.
And I think the surplus spending deal that he negotiated with Robin Voss and Republican leadership this summer that really divided a lot of Democrats,
Mhm.
particularly Democrats in the legislature. I mean, it ultimately didn't pass,
Yeah.
so it clearly divided Democrats in a lot of ways. I think Kelda Roys was very vocally against it from the jump.
Mhm.
Francesca Hong was against it. Like that, most of the field was against it except for Missy Hughes. And then so I think that divided Democrats. And then when it was, so I think some of those, like, let's say purple district Democrats who were going to line up behind Sarah Rodriguez and back her candidacy were a little bit more hesitant when it was Crowley because they had just had
Mhm.
this really fractious debate with the governor on an issue that they all were really cared about deeply. And so I think that made it
Mhm.
complicated for there to be something like that.
Yeah. One of the questions that we have gotten into in the office and at our last community meeting is the timing, right, of the governor getting back in,
Yeah.
the timing of the domino effects, right, between Sarah and Crowley and jumping back in, like all of that. It all happened very, very quickly. In a probably in a span of what, week or 10
Yeah.
days, if that. Yeah.
It was
Um,
that Sunday night press release, it was, July 12th, and then the
okay.
following Saturday, David
Was
Crowley's
the
re-entry at 3rd Street Market Hall,
That's right.
where I
Yeah.
saw you.
So like
Yeah.
it's a wild timeline,
Yeah.
right? It's a crazy timeline to think about how fast things move. And so I say that to say Crowley was if he was gonna get back in the race, like, he only had a limited time to figure it out, you know what I mean? Because it was
Right.
already late, so it already wasn't an ideal timing. I think my question is the timing of the governor's endorsement. And I'm sure that there were probably conversations where, Crawley had said, I was getting phone calls. I called him and I said, "Hey, the ambassadors are asking, like, is this possible? Where's your head at?" We didn't
Right.
advocate one way or another, but he's like, "I'm getting calls." And,
Yeah.
and I'm sure if you're gonna make that big of a choice to get back in a very unprecedented type of way, of course you're gonna say, all right, you want me in? These are the things that I'm gonna need. I'm sure, endorsements from folks, including the governor, was probably on that list. If I'm going to get back in, I'm going to do this right. And this is, the things that I need. And so that makes sense if that's how that went down. If that's what but it's just strange to me because he could have endorsed Crawley before he dropped out. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And I'm sure, again, it's tricky because you're not going to if your current lieutenant governor is in there and your former lieutenant governor, right? And so I think Sarah dropping out maybe gave him the ability to say, maybe I can do this. Mandela's my former, but at least he's not my current lieutenant governor.
Mhm.
But all of that kind of just made things look a particular way. And I think that feeds into why people think it's the establishment, right? Because whether it was intended to look shady or not, or it doesn't look like they're all doing this to stop Fran and whatever arguments people were saying on Twitter, it further adds to I think that establishment narrative just given the timeline too, whether that's fair
Mhm.
or not.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. And I think, the a lot of the endorsements that were going to Rodriguez or were going to go to Rodriguez from, like, your typical, I guess, establishment groups like unions, like, other folks
Yeah.
like that, that have since backed Crowley, Gwen Moore, also,
Yep.
you know, backing Crowley too. And that's a factor that I wanted to talk to you about as well, was
Mm.
Milwaukee. Milwaukee's place in all of this, which is that, one of the things that I think Francesca Hong has talked about, a lot of the Democratic Socialists have talked about in this campaign, is that Bernie Sanders won 71 of 72 counties in that primary in 2016. What's the one county that he did not win?
Milwaukee.
That was Milwaukee. So, and I
I
talked
forgot
about,
about that tidbit.
yeah. And so I do wonder if
Yeah,
we're
right.
looking at, what a results map might look like next Tuesday
Sure.
night. Who's going to win Milwaukee? Especially now with Barnes out of the race. And I don't think,
that's a question.
we took a look at some polling at our friends at State Navigate took a look at, they polled by area
Yep.
code, which I found fascinating.
Mhm.
And in that poll by area code, the 414 numbers, David Crowley was at 33% and Francesca Hong was at 33%, and Mandela Barnes was kind of a distant
Mhm.
third at somewhere around 15%, I want to say. Uh,
Mhm.
and so I think, you go to the east side, you go to Bayview right now, there's a lot of Francesca Hong
Yeah.
signs.
Yeah.
We're on the
Yeah.
west side here. It's been really, it's like my neighborhood in Washington Heights. I'll go walk my dog. I remember there's one day I walked my dog and I saw 4 different candidate signs just walking a mile around the loop. There was a Sarah Rodriguez, David
Yeah.
Crowley, Francesca Hong, and there's a bunch of Joel Brennan signs on the west side of Milwaukee. Not
Mm.
just Tom Barrett's house, but also Tom Barrett's house. Uh,
Sure.
um,
That's right.
but so I think it's a little split over here. I do want, like, what is Gwen Moore's endorsement going to matter? What is the Laborers District Council going to matter for Milwaukee? Like, there's a lot of, blue collar union folks in this city who are going to go to the polls. There's a lot of, people who, you know, despite what some folks from Madison might think, Gwen Moore's a pretty big deal in Milwaukee, and so, like, I do think her endorsement
We do
matters.
know who she is.
We do know who
Yeah.
she is,
Yeah.
here in this city. So so, I mean, what do you make of how Milwaukee is responding to this primary?
It's interesting. I would say, so one, when I'm driving around, whether it's like to and from work, which is driving from the east side to the north side, which is I try not to take the freeway if I'm just driving in the city. If I'm driving out of the city, I will, but I never take the freeway anywhere. I'm always trying to take the streets intentionally. And so going from the east side to the north side, what's interesting is I still always see the same type of signs. It's Fran and Crawley. The closer you get to the north side, I see, we're off of Capitol, so there's a lot of Crawley signs. I think I've seen one Joel Brennan sign, and that was like on Humboldt in River West, which I was like, that's interesting. Um, haven't seen any Kelda or any other signs anywhere. I couldn't even tell you what they looked like.
I saw one
But
Kelda
I
sign in
think
Tosa. That was it for me. Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. That sounds about right. I'm surprised there's not more in Tosa, actually. Or maybe just Joel Brennan's got that up
Sorry,
on
I
that one.
interrupted you, though. Go ahead.
Um, no, no. I think what I'll be curious about is in 2016, I wanna see the numbers. Um, because the congresswoman, she does carry weight, people respect her. She's been elected for multiple decades. No shade to her, not trying to age her, but, like, she's got experience, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are some people that, she's beloved by the community, and I think that can add weight. I remember in 2018 intentionally putting her on a lip piece with Tony Evers, thinking I was gonna help Tony Evers win. You know what I mean? We're like, "This
Mhm.
is gonna help," because she's so beloved, and so I think that that will make a difference. Part of me wonders, is it changing anyone's mind? The people that her endorsement means something, are they already going towards Crowley? Like, is she bringing in new people? I don't know. Um, and yeah, Bernie didn't win Milwaukee, but I also think a lot has changed since Bernie ran.
Yeah.
There's a higher class consciousness now. DSA, love them, hate them, whatever. DSA is building power. They have a lot
Yeah.
of really intentional like volunteer programs and ways for people to plug in. And so I'm not saying Fran is gonna automatically get Matt or Milwaukee, but I'd be very curious to see how that compares to the Bernie numbers in 2016, and I think, even if she doesn't win Milwaukee, I think she probably closed that gap, and, probably will do a lot better than what Bernie did. Because I think, she relates more. I think the political landscape is different. People are hurting and feeling the classism in a more visceral, personal way than I think maybe people realized in 2016. Bernie, I think, kinda kicked it off, but I think there's more of an awareness now that hasn't been before. So I'm really curious to see. I think she's gonna do well in Milwaukee. I can't say for sure she's gonna take it, but I think she'll be very competitive in Milwaukee, I think. I'd be surprised. If she's not, I'll be curious to see the numbers, and someone smarter than me needs to break them down, but that's my
Well,
thoughts.
I think I think she's gonna do well in Milwaukee too, and I think it is,
Yeah.
um, it's the generation gap, right? I think it's so many of the younger,
Yes.
like, we saw that
Yep.
in the polling really in a just a such a staggeringly significant way, where,
Yes.
like, every voter under
Mhm.
the age of 45 in the Marquette poll was going for Fran. No other candidate was
Yep.
even in double digits there, and so I
Mhm.
I think, you've got, a lot of young people in Milwaukee, like,
Yep.
and a lot of young people who live,
Yeah.
on those, like, East Side, Bayview, Walker's Point neighborhoods
Yep.
who are going to be really enthusiastic about voting for Fran and
Yeah.
not wanting to compromise and say, like, "Oh, I'm gonna go for the
Right.
electability candidate," and it's just like, "No, we're going with this candidate, we're going with democratic socialism." Yeah,
Mhm.
democratic socialism. And I think, so I think she's going to do pretty well here. I do wonder if the Crowley could carry the county though, overall. Like, he's pretty well known in the county.
I think so.
He's in his 6th year as Milwaukee County executive.
Mhm.
I think in certain pockets, like, he's gonna be a little bit more well known than
Yep.
than Kelder or Joel Brennan or some of the other folks
Right.
who were in the race before that. I think Crowley has more of a even when Barnes was in the race, I thought Crowley would do better than Barnes in Milwaukee County too.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think that's a possibility. And when I talked to Chaz from State Navigate on that podcast a couple of weeks ago, he said it was possible that like Fran could win. It could be the same dynamic where she could
Mm,
win 71 counties just as Bernie did in
yeah.
2016, but Crowley could win Milwaukee County. I'm not ruling that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
But you're right. There are two Democratic Socialist Assembly representatives in
Mhm.
Milwaukee. That was not the
Mhm.
case in 2016 either.
Right. Right. And so I think,
Um,
all of that is I'm really curious to see how that it's evolved, and I think that's also not trying to put a lot of stock into it, but I think it's also a testament to, like, on the ground grassroots organizing too. There's been so many other organizations, and this is not a plug at Block, but just, like, whether it's DSA building power or, like, other youth groups that are organizing, seeing new people trying to plug in, and people wanting, something more. They don't want the middle of the road. They don't wanna
mhm.
compromise, and they're excited for a primary. And what I was actually really curious when I talked to you about is there's always been this concept and this phrase blue no matter who. And it was
Mm.
largely said from moderates to us lefties of like blue
Mhm.
no matter who. Vote for Kamala Harris, vote for Joe Biden, vote for Hilary Clinton, vote blue no matter who, right?
Mhm.
And I have been wondering if Francesca Hong is indeed, in fact, nominee, does that blue no matter who work the other way with the moderates?
It better. It better.
I'm like, we gotta start having that conversation now, y'all.
Absolutely. And I think she's just, and you know me, I probably am to the right of most progressives and to the left of most centrists. I kind of have a weird political ideology on certain things. But I think I've said this repeatedly. If she is the nominee, I'm going to be very
Yeah.
excited to vote for her against Tom
Yeah,
Tiffany.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
August 12th, like, yes, we're going to turn the
Mhm.
page. Tom Tiffany is a disaster. He is a far right election denier. I wrote a column. I think just based on that, he is unfit for office. And then before you
Absolutely.
get to the policies that I
Yeah,
completely
exactly.
vehemently disagree with on so many different levels, and he has
Mhm.
put absolutely no distance between himself and Donald Trump on really any issue. Trump's
Right.
poll numbers are tanking in Wisconsin, and so yes, we might have an election where we have a extremely far right candidate and a very far left candidate in this election, but that is Wisconsin in a lot of ways. And I think people can
That
miss that
is
about this state.
Wisconsin.
And like, look at our two US
Yeah.
senators. Like, people have often remarked that Tammy Baldwin and Ron Johnson are about as far as apart as you can get as two US senators can be. Francesca Hong and Tom Tiffany are
Mhm.
even further apart. And I think,
Yeah.
you look at the ideology in some of these, super blue districts in Milwaukee and Madison and pockets of
Mhm.
blue districts that are around Wisconsin, it is not a lot of moderate votes. It is a lot
Yeah.
of very red votes, and it is a lot of
Yes.
very blue votes.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that warps some of the conversation, the vote blue no matter who. And it's just like everybody just assumes, oh, you're going to perfectly calibrate to the center to win over those votes. That's not quite how it works either.
It's not.
Because
It's not at all.
people don't necessarily think of it that way, and there
No.
might be right wing voters who voted for Trump who might be voting for Francesca Hong because they don't want a data center in their backyard
Yeah,
in this
exactly.
election, or there might be
Mhm.
somebody else, a more suburban swing voter or whatever, who might vote against Tom Tiffany because he was an election denier, or because he took away health care,
Mhm.
or for any number of reasons. And so I
Mhm.
think it would be a different map than it would be if, let's say, it was Sarah Rodriguez as the
Absolutely.
nominee. It would be
Yep.
a very different map, but I don't think that necessarily means that it's going to be, oh, her chances are so much worse and whatever it
Yeah.
might be. I've looked at the numbers. I've looked at every Marquette poll going back 7 years since
Mhm.
I started the recombobulation area, and the most recent numbers that showed Francesca Hong in a head-to-head with Tom Tiffany showed her basically tied.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's Wisconsin. That's what we
Yeah.
should be expecting every statewide election. Like,
Exactly
when
what it
is
is.
this not the case?
I mean, how many elections have been decided within, like, a percentage point? Like, statewide elections? Like, we're used to this now. I
Yeah.
also I'm just gonna use this opportunity because I haven't said it today. I blame Scott Walker for this. Mostly because I think after the recall, there was no I'm not saying that there's not moderates, that there aren't undecideds and folks in the middle, but I think the Walker recall split our state so much that, like, you're on one side or another. There's not this, "Oh, I see one side," but, like, there's really not a lot of, like, true moderates. There may be undecideds, but I don't think there's a lot of true moderates. I think there's some people that are like, "I'm done with politics. I'm removing myself from the political system," and I think maybe that they would consider themselves moderate. But I think in a state like Wisconsin, I think about how just our dynamics amongst our networks, our friends, our family dynamics. Like, people are ending relationships and family dynamics of like, did you sign the recall petition? I can go look it up. Don't lie to me.
Mhm,
Like,
mhm.
it's a whole thing. And so I often come back to that and thinking of why we're on these like extremes. And very curious to see how that plays out in a state like Wisconsin, where there is a lot of commonality, but we're living in these extremes. But then you have these anomalies, like you said, of data centers or healthcare or whatever it is that make people maybe vote in a way that isn't traditional before because they want something new.
Mhm.
And I think of, I mean, Wisconsin by no means is New York, right? But I think about I saw a video of a man that said MAGA for Mom Donnie. And, like, I was like, "Huh? What? I don't." Right? But, like, there are those people that are like, "Things are so crappy now that I need to vote for somebody different. I don't care who it
Mhm.
is. I don't care what they if they're a Democrat or Republican." And so I'll be curious to see how big that group of people that may vote in a non-traditional way than maybe what they're used to and how big that section is.
Yeah, 2 things that you made me think of with that. One is just, like, the polarization that began with the Scott Walker era and the recall and all of that was just amplified by the gerrymander for the next 10 years
Yes.
too,
Yes.
because nobody is, like, trying to, you know, compete for there were so far fewer swing votes
Mhm.
in that kinda thing. It was just, balkanized into, like, it's more important to, like, win a primary
Yep.
than it is to win a general election, so I think that was, um, it certainly made our politics even more
Mhm.
polarized over the 10 plus years that that
Yeah.
gerrymander, was in place.
Yeah.
Um, I had a second point, and now I lost it. Um, but, that I think that's such a big part of it, and then I think too, here's what it is. So, like, I went to college at UW Oshkosh, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think in the Fox Valley, there is this just kind of default position where I hate both parties, and
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah, yeah,
gonna
yeah. Yep.
vote for whoever I know or whoever I like. There was a
Yeah.
real independent streak, in that part of the state, and I think, there's a similar independent streak in Western Wisconsin,
Sure.
and I think, the example I use often with the Fox Valley is like Winnebago, Outagamie, Brown, and Door counties in the 2018 election all went for Scott Walker and all went for Tammy Baldwin.
Mhm.
And so I think you will have some
We're gonna have that.
unpredictable results because you have, the national environment being what it is, these candidates being so toward the ends of the political spectrum. And I think that's going to make some difficult decisions for people, sure. But
Yeah.
I think to say that it's just like, it's obviously going to be this, we get your perfectly calibrated centrist candidate, that hasn't worked either.
No.
And so, you know, and there's a lot still that's going to happen. Did we think a week ago that we'd be talking so much about
No.
Thanksgiving? No.
No. Not at all. It's ridiculous. Part of me is like, "Who cares?" But it's like, I get it. Fine, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the nature of campaigns these days. I sound old. When I first started working on campaigns, we had, like, paper walk packs, right? Like, we weren't digging up old tweets, and that's, like,
Yeah.
not a thing, but now that's the norm, thanks Donald Trump. But even, like, I think about, again, Zoran Mamdani, like, that's all that the right was able to dig up is, like, him and somebody that he's friends with had a tweet about white supremacy. So it's like it's become ingrained that that's part of the like the campaigns
Yeah.
now, which is
Yeah.
fascinating in lots of ways, but
And then we live in an attention economy, and this
yes.
is the Trump era. And I wrote a piece on this called talking about how Donald Trump has transformed the party from kind of the country club Republicans of old to the pro wrestling Republicans of now.
Yes.
And it is about getting people's attention. It is about using
Yes.
like universal issues like Thanksgiving to drive a wedge, to
Yeah.
use these different things. And not everybody is going to, have a super nuanced opinion about, when and how to phase out the voucher program
Right.
or whatever it might be, or how
Right.
to address PFAS, or whether Act 12, gave the right type of requirements for the city of Milwaukee. Like
Mm.
those are the types of things that you and I will talk about on a podcast when we've done these over the past.
Yep.
But like, it's, normal people are living their lives.
No.
And so
Yeah.
certain things
We're
are going
not
to break
normal people.
through, and like the attention economy is such an important part of that. And like, the right exploits that
Yes.
successfully to their ends. And we gotta be vigilant about it. We gotta take a look at those things, but we also just have to recognize we can't just be numb to the reality of it and say like, we should really be talking about the issues. Other stuff's gonna break through. Like this is we got to be
Mhm.
realistic about this stuff too. So
That's true. I can also be annoyed by it, though.
I
So
mean
that's
that's
my curmudgeon.
more than fair, more than fair. We should, and I think I was thinking about this too, because we hosted that forum at the very beginning of
Yeah.
kind of this campaign. There have been so many forums. And I asked David Crowley about this in an interview I did with him this week. I asked him about, at these forums, was there a policy from one of the other candidates that you really
Mm.
liked, that you wanted to make part of your platform? I've asked that to a number of candidates.
Mhm.
And he said his first way of answering it was to say, that he's like, we kind of agree on a lot. He's like, that's what a lot of those
Mhm.
forums showed us, that we agreed on a lot. So he
Yeah.
was frankly a little evasive on answering that question. Uh,
Sure.
but I think a lot of the candidates, as we've seen in the forum, and I think as we
Yeah.
saw in the debate last week, a lot of these candidates do agree on a lot.
Yeah.
So if you don't have major policy disagreements on healthcare, on childcare, it's going to become these other things.
So then it's Thanksgiving. Okay.
Yeah. The contrast between the Republicans it's going to be a little bit more stark.
Yeah.
All right.
She should turn it into a fundraiser. Like, she's gotta, like, make a whole thing.
Yeah.
Like,
We
turn it
got
into a fundraiser, do a little cheeky pie moment or something, I don't know.
there's
Make some
makes
pie.
she is a chef. She'll whip something up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make some
All right.
pumpkin pie or something, yeah.
Yeah. All right. I got to wrap up here, Angela. But is there anything else that you want to talk about before these final 5 days?
I
Five
think I
days.
got most of my gripes out, but I will probably have more by the end of tonight,
Yeah.
just so you know.
Okay. All right.
So,
Well, we'll look for those. Share them on the
yep.
socials. I'll say one final thought here. I love when we get to a really end of a really contentious primary or election, and the Facebook posts become really long and confessional. I fucking love it. Go
They
for it.
do.
I really
They
love that.
do. It's
I
like
read
everyone
all of
reaches their
them.
breaking point.
Yeah, and it's just like people have got to get a few things off their chest, and they have the multi-paragraph Facebook posts. That's not just the one-liner hot take on things. And you know what? I like it. I really
And then
enjoy
they'll
it.
be like, then it looks like you're reading and it's like 85 comments. And you're like,
Yeah,
I need to read every single one
yeah,
because I know they're
yeah,
fighting. I gotta
yeah,
see it.
yeah, yeah.
I do enjoy those. I will take
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Readers and listeners, send me all of your Facebook posts. I enjoy them all.
Please
I
do.
enjoy people getting passionate about politics.
Better than the opposite,
Yeah,
right? Even if I don't
yeah,
agree with you, I'd rather disagree with you if you're passionate than just apathetic and not care. So
yeah. Let's just disagree without being disagreeable or insulting,
exactly.
whatever, and any of that too.
Yes.
We're all friends here. We're all Wisconsinites at the end of the day.
Ex-
All right, Angela. Good luck out there. Stay
You
vigilant.
too.
Stay safe. Stay as recombobulated as possible, and we'll
Will
talk
do
to you
my
real soon.
best. All right. Sounds good.
Thanks.